Welcome to Six Count. I'm your host, Zara Wild, bringing you the jazz and swing scene from the Capital Region. Dr. Bailey, thank you for speaking with me.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'd like to talk about your book. You've always got lots of different interesting novels in the works, it seems. But this one is on a really interesting time period in 1939. So will you share a little bit about what that's going to look like?
Yeah, 1939, in fact, the pre-World War II era is era I've been really interested in for years and done some research on Prohibition and Depression, the Great Depression. And in the process of doing that, I really found myself focusing more and more on 1939 because it was such an interesting year in so many different ways, the movies, the politics, all of the changes taking place. It's the golden year for movies, it's the year for jazz, it's the year for protests, and we're moving into a whole new world in many ways with the New York City World's Fair.
And it sounds like you have a couple different key events that help pull the narrative forward. Can you share what those are?
Yeah, there is a white nationalist rally at Madison Square Garden in February 1939. April 1939, Marian Anderson performs on Easter Sunday at the Lincoln Memorial. And then there's the New York World's Fair, the Whirl of Tomorrow. Then in fall, we got Billie Holiday performing Strange Fruit at Café Society. And then finally, there's a 4-day premiere of Gone with the Wind, and that happens in Atlanta, Georgia.
The Café Society in particular seems like such an interesting place in Barney Jofinson, who was pulling in artists from such great talent. What can you share about the Café Society, and why was that one of the big parts of the narrative?
Well, Café Society, as you said, is really interesting because it's a place where radicals, from the point of view of the government, were gathering. The people that they saw as communists, socialists, protesters in a variety of ways. And it was unique in the sense that it was bringing together whites and blacks in one setting, different from the Cotton Club and other locales at that time, in the sense that blacks were not just there as people who were serving and performing, but they were actually patrons and allowed to come in, invited to come in and take part in the political discussion. And they were seen as radicals of interest to the FBI and other agencies.
Yeah, it sounds like it wasn't just the first nightclub to welcome people of color, but also that it was actually racially integrated in the U.S. And so it wasn't just having musicians playing behind a screen as white musicians mimicked their playing.
Yeah, it was a place where Billie Holiday could perform Strange Fruit and have an audience.
And what do you know about that first performance of Strange Fruit, which was highly controversial at the time?
Well, it was still really interesting in terms of the way it was set up. As I understand it, Billie Holiday was somewhat reluctant to perform initially, and when she does perform, it's done in such a way that she sings it, the lights are dark, and she doesn't step back and wait for applause. It's simply the song itself carries the weight of this message that they're trying to convey about lynching in the South. And she continues to perform that and attract conversation about this.
And even with a receptive audience, or those who were more progressive and trying to advance ideas that just weren't accepted at that time, even there it seemed like it was very impactful for that audience.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it was the idea of your bodies hanging from your southern trees and the imagery of that, I think was startling for people who not really thought about the nature of lynching and what it really meant in terms of those bodies.
Do you know anything about the writer of the song and that relationship between him and Billie?
Well, I think later on, she said that the song was written for her, inspired by her. I don't believe that was the case in terms of, because obviously he had written the song before she performed it. But I think that he gave her a song that was memorable in so many ways and made her famous as someone who was engaging in this protest that began at the time and is still going on in many ways.
And I imagine that she herself knew the risk she was taking in being willing to sing such a politically slanted song, even if the Café Society was meant to be that kind of a community where these ideas were told. I just wonder what was going on in her mind that night.
I think she was initially somewhat reluctant to sing that song because it wasn't something that was not similar to the other songs she had been singing and what she was identified with, which was more bluesy, jazzy songs that other people were also doing.
We'll be right back with Six Count. I'm your host, Zara Wild. Stay with us. We'd like to thank Giants of Jazz Radio, based in Lancashire, England, for airing this show. The station brings you the best in classic jazz, playing tracks from the 1940s through the 70s. You can support the station by visiting their website at giantsofjazzradio.co.uk and clicking Donate. And now, back to the show.
Without giving any spoilers, what can you share about the protagonist of the book and the connections to the events, the World Fair and this rally, the performance on Easter Sunday? How does he fit into this year?
My protagonist is actually a Pullman sleeping car porter, an African-American man. The porters were not unique, and I can't say he was the only porter. There were thousands of them at the height of this. George Pullman, a white man who created the Pullman coach company. The Pullman coaches were attached to regular trains, and they were trains where the people could afford elite travel would ride. And George Pullman went out and recruited black men who were either people who had come out of slavery or descendants of those people, and they were actually people who were servers who served the customers who were traveling in these Pullman coaches, and the Pullman porters were often well-educated, among the best educated in the black community, unable to get any other job, but an elite group in the black community because they wore uniforms, they traveled, they were sophisticated and knowledgeable. And so my Pullman porter is a young college-educated man who's saving money to go to law school, and to do that, he's working as a Pullman porter. I also have an African-American teacher, a young woman who leaves the South and comes north. And my other protagonist is a black housekeeper who works for a senator. And the story is being told through their eyes.
And then there's also a jazz connection. Can you reveal anything about that?
Yeah, the jazz connection is when my Pullman porter is out investigating, more or less, and he's going to these jazz clubs and he's talking to people. And in the course of doing that, he crosses paths with Billie Holiday and Café Society and the people involved in jazz. And I have something else that I don't want to give away about it, but it does also involve jazz.
Everyone will have to wait for the book for that. And when does it come out?
Well, I've got to finish it first. My agent's waiting for me to finish this book. He's been after me for the past 2 or 3 years to get it done, get it finished. I'm trying to do this while working on the gangster book and some other things I'm working on.
Is there anything you'd want to share about the jazz connections from the 1939 historical thriller that we've been talking about, or anything else from that period that you think our listeners would be interested to know about?
Well, yeah, it's such an interesting period. One of the things I'm going to try to do, and which isn't something I would normally do, but I want to provide a bibliography at the end so that people who want to go out and learn more about 1939 and what was going on can do that. And the really interesting thing for me is that I didn't know that much about jazz until I started to write this. And so I'm going to be listening to jazz as I'm writing, and I want to also highlight that music as an appendix to the book.
Are there other songs beyond Strange Fruit? That, of course, is one of the most famous ones. But are there other ones that you have found along the way that have told you something interesting about that year?
Of course, Wizard of Oz, Over the Rainbow. It's a song, as we're moving towards those dark days of World War II. It's very hopeful. It's, someday over the rainbow, it captures, that wish fulfillment kind of thing. So it's very wishful, and then we're going, and when we get into World War II, there are all those songs that are patriotic and also wishful about peace and happiness. And so you got that in contrast with Strange Fruit, and it's really kind of interesting.
Well, Frankie, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, thank you. This has been great.
That was Frankie Bailey, and you'll have to look out for her book, which will be called
A Penny Struck by Lightning.
Well, looking forward to it. Frankie, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Six Count. I'm your host, Zara Wild. This show is listener supported. If you're interested in contributing to the project, you can find the link to our donations page on our website at sixcount.simplecast.com. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can let me know what you thought of the episode or who I should speak to next by emailing me. I'm at sixcountpodcast@gmail.com, or you can find me on Twitter at sixcountpodcast.